What have you Saddam Hussein? What's that like?
I was terrified.
I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK. Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's 3:10. You're with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. And I am in Brighton at the Royal British Legion. We are raising a bit of money, quite a bit of money, as it turns out, for the Poppy Appeal. So far, you wonderful people have managed to raise more than £102,000 for the Royal British Legion's Poppy Appeal. You can go to justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. More on that and exactly why we're here to show a good bit of British patriotism in some turbulent times very shortly. But it's not the only story in town, because we're also going to be talking as well about that COVID inquiry with Tom Harwood. I'll go to him shortly. I'm going to find out the latest very concerning incident taking place in Paris, a shooting there. We're also going to be talking to our man in Tel Aviv, Mark White, about Keir Starmer's latest comments and why he's in hot water over Labour's policy on Israel, Gaza and Hamas. And of course, we'll be getting the latest from RAF Scampton. That's a story that ties into exactly why we're here. Thank you very much, you wonderful GB News viewers and listeners, for everything you've been doing for us to raise a bit of money for a very, very good cause. Yes, well, I'm just going to give you a live update on how we're getting on the donations. £102,592 in 24 hours. Give yourselves a big round of applause if you're watching at home, if you're driving in your car, if it's safe to do so. That link again is justgiving.com/page/GB-News-Poppy. We're in Brighton because, unfortunately, for a little while, Brighton was struggling to find somebody to replace a long-standing poppy-selling volunteer, and we thought that cannot stand. This is happening all over the country. It's a sign of the times, I think, and we didn't want that to be the case here at GB News. So we thought we'd do something about it, and crucially, so did you, raising a whopping amount of money. We're going to be doing a whole show on this and a few other topics, but it's back to Tom Harwood now, our Deputy Political Editor, for the latest on an explosive COVID inquiry testimony. Tom.
Yes, Patrick, we're used to Dominic Cummings criticising Boris Johnson, but I don't think anyone here was quite prepared for the broadside that the former chief advisor to the Prime Minister had for just about all of the British establishment. It was the Cabinet Office, the Health Department, and even Sage that was in the sights of Dominic Cummings today, where he criticised those three groups for not even countenancing lockdown until early March, far from the narrative that has been built up until today, whereby the scientists were saying lockdown and the politicians were saying no. What Dominic Cummings has been saying today is that it was actually the scientists and Sage and the communication between them and Number 10 that wasn't even countenancing that a Western country could do lockdown. Dominic Cummings said that in his ideal scenario, what we would have done back before the new year, back in 2019, is he would have banned all flights to China. But he was critical of the establishment who said such a move may have been racist. Dominic Cummings criticised those who were saying we shouldn't close the borders and develop a proper test and trace system, which he said, had we done back in those early months, we might have avoided lockdown altogether. But no, Dominic Cummings was very, very critical of all of these structures of government, the people behind the scenes, many civil servants as well, who couldn't countenance such a plan. It's been fascinating to hear how Dominic Cummings actually had praise for one individual who you might not have thought would be mentioned today at this inquiry, and that was the supermodel Caprice. She was on the television in 2020 saying, why don't we have these stricter measures, and was ridiculed by the scientific establishment at the time. Well, Dominic Cummings said today that perhaps it was the supermodel Caprice that was right, and at that time many of the scientists who were wrong, completely turning on its head how many people are thinking about the pandemic. Other highlights this morning include the former chief advisor to the Prime Minister and his WhatsApp messages describing senior politicians as F-pigs, I'm not going to say the rude word at this hour on television, and C-words, all read out in plain terms by the government lawyer. It has been a firework-filled exchange, and there's plenty more to come.
Well, there certainly is. Tom, thank you very, very much. That's with that, our Deputy Political Editor, whizzing you through the very latest from that COVID inquiry, box office stuff. But look, the reason why we are here at the Port Slade Royal British Legion in Brighton is pretty obvious. We are living through turbulent times in this country at the moment. I think as evidence in the run-up to Remembrance Day by the cenotaph in London being cordoned off, with the non-stop protests that we seem to be seeing around the country at the moment, and that really got me thinking. I think this is a time to show where our loyalties lie in this country and exactly how we feel about our brave and not to have that ruined by events taking place.
OK, I think we appear to be having connection
There's
issues.
Some gremlins. It is Halloween, isn't it?
Some gremlins there to link into Patrick in Brighton. But he was raising excellent points there, of course, and also talking about the run-up towards Armistice Day, which is in 2 weeks. And you and I have been talking about, I know Patrick has, about the pro-Palestine marches that have gone on for the last 3 Saturdays. Will they continue to go on? It looks like they most likely will. And Emily, if they carry on for another 2 weeks, then that will roll through to Armistice Day, of course, the 11th of the 11th hour. This year falls on a Saturday. Of course, Remembrance Sunday, obviously, is a Sunday. But the Saturday is also marked by a 2-minute silence, historically always marked and remembered by veterans and the broader British public. And there have already been talks about that being dishonoured.
Yes, and we at GB News well, we are absolutely certain in our mind that Armistice Day and remembrance must take priority when it
100%.
When it comes to 2 weeks from now. But £102,000, nearly £103,000 plus gift aid has been raised in just 24 hours for the Royal British Legion. That is absolutely fantastic. I'm sure many of you watching and listening right now have contributed. Put your hands in your pockets and donated anything from £2 to £200. It's coming in 6,672 individual donations so far. That is quite incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's also really, really needed, because I don't know about you out there, but I've been saying this for the last few days on GB News. It's becoming increasingly hard to be able to buy a poppy. In my local supermarkets, 3 of them in my area that previously you could buy a poppy from at the counter, no longer there. Got mine yesterday at the station at Paddington here. I was so jubilant when I saw the poppy sellers. I bounded over to them and started shaking their hands. I think they thought I was a bit of a nutter, but I was so happy to see them. So it's so amazing that Patrick is doing this and raising money directly from you guys. Your generosity knows no bounds.
And I know you talk about this quite a lot, Martin, but the fact that when we look at British history, we often look at times when, oh, well, I'm going to have to cut into what I was about to say. Perhaps we'll get to it later, because it is the COVID inquiry and it has recommenced. So there we go.
In the United Kingdom. On the 21st of February, news emerged of a cluster of locally transmitted cases in Lombardy in Italy, and a lockdown began there, you'll recall, of a number of municipalities. And on the 23rd of February, the DHSC reported 13 cases in the United Kingdom. The paperwork shows that the pace of the government tempo, the tempo of work in government, declined notably between the 14th of February and the 24th of February, which coincidentally is half-term. Why was that?
I think it was a combination of, as I said earlier, the general perception of the senior people handling this in the Cabinet Office, DH, at the time, was that if this proved to be a big problem, and it still was an if, then it was seen as really quite a distant problem. It was not seen as an emergency crisis. And secondly, as you remark, I did not go on holiday, but many of the senior people were on holiday during that time, including the PM.
There was no Cobra between the 18th of February and the 26th of February, was there?
Don't know.
There were no cabinets. There were no cabinet meetings during that time, do you recall?
Don't recall.
There were no notes sent to the Prime Minister or emails between the 14th of February and the 24th of February.
I find that, I think that's more likely to be a gap in the paperwork than reflecting reality.
In relation to coronavirus?
I don't know.
He went to Cheveney on the 14th of February. He returned to Downing Street 3 times for work. His diary shows that there were a handful of meetings while he was in Cheveney, but he received from his team in Downing Street absolutely nothing in relation to coronavirus between the 14th of February and the 24th of February. You were part of that team. Why was he not kept in the loop in relation to the developing crisis?
Well, partly for the reasons I've already said. It wasn't seen as an imminent crisis in the Cabinet Office and by the Cabinet, by the systems responsible for dealing with crises. When he did briefly reappear for meetings, or for example on the meltdown in the Home Office, Imran and I did talk to him about coronavirus, and we did try and get into his head that this was a growing problem and had not gone away.
You say there was a lack of understanding that there was a crisis. You had received text messages or information yourself that the virus was probably out of control. Cobra had been reporting that there was now clear evidence of sustained transmission outside China. you knew, and Number 10 knew, that the virus had exploded in Italy. And you knew there were cases already in the United Kingdom. How can it possibly have been thought that there was no crisis?
Well, as I said, round about when the Prime Minister went away on holiday after the reshuffle, around about sort of 13th, 14th, 13th, 14th of February looked very, very different to 28th of February. So things evolved a lot over that period of time. You are, of course, I mean, your fundamental point is obviously correct, that there was indeed a massive crisis. It was indeed pretty insane that so many of the senior people were away on holiday at that time. But it's also important to realise that it's not like the Civil Contingencies Secretariat or the National Security Council or any of the organisations in charge of this were beating the drum and saying, we've got to get the PM back, this is a massive crisis. In fact, quite the opposite. As Patrick Vallance and others have pointed out, but apart from me, the NSC and other things were treating it like the rest of Whitehall was. Like, maybe this will be a big problem, but if it is, it's going to be in May or June.
If it was insane, as you've described it, for them to be away, to be on holiday, or whatever everybody was doing, and for there to be a complete absence of administrative push in relation to coronavirus during that 10-day period, why weren't you banging on the metaphorical door of Cheveney saying, you've got to come back. We have a crisis. This virus is about to overrun us.
Well, I was talking to all sorts of people in that period. I was not on holiday, and I was pushing and talking to Patrick and other people. But I did not regard, and neither did other people, we did not think that asking the PM to come back and talk to Cobra or Whitehall in general at that point would have been productive. In fact, I thought it would have been counterproductive, because I thought he would have said to everybody what he thought at the time, which was, this is another swine flu, it's all another rubbish media hoax, nothing will happen, blah, 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 blah. The real danger is the economy getting talked into a slump. I thought that if he came back from Cheveney and said that to Cobra or to any other any other part of government, it would be counterproductive rather than helpful.
So are you saying you did actively consider the possibility of asking him to come back and talk to Cobra or Whitehall?
Yes, it was discussed while he was away.
With who?
I discussed it with Imran, and I discussed it with Martin and others in Number 10.
Is there any record or any note whatsoever of that debate, Mr. Cummings?
Don't know.
Are you surprised to hear that there is no note, as far as we can tell, of asking the Prime Minister to come back and take charge of the crisis?
No, not surprising, because there were conversations. It wasn't, there was people all in the same, sitting next to each other at work.
Well, you're not averse to sending WhatsApps and texts 24 hours a day, Mr. Cummings.
No, I'm not. But as I say, I was sitting right next to Martin and Imran. I didn't have to. This was conversations that we had around the office at that time.
INQ 236371, WhatsApp messages, Number 10 action, page 47, on the 27th of February, after his return from Cheveney. Mr. Johnson said, in response to a suggestion from Lee Kane, I think a Monday coronavirus Cobra meeting with the Prime Minister as chair, very important to show grip. Suggested to Martin Reynolds earlier, so think he's handling. Dominic Cummings, yeah, we should pencil in an interview early next week on this too. We've got to sort stuff out over the next few days, but Monday must be a new level. And Mr. Johnson says at the end of this particular thread, not sure if we can wait till Monday. There's no reference there to the possibility that he'd been asked to come back earlier, or that there should be a Cobra while he was in Cheveney. Is there?
No.
And he asked, or he said, I'm not convinced we're showing grip on.
OK, so that is the latest from the COVID inquiry there. As you can see, I am here in Brighton at the Royal British Legion. We're going to be doing a special here because we're doing our poppy appeal. So thank you very much for everybody who's donated right across the country. Unfortunately, it's proving difficult to get people to sell poppies and to volunteer. So we thought we'd try and step in and do our bit. And we set up a Just Giving page. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. And you wonderful people have so far donated a staggering £103,000. So very shortly I am going to be talking to local councillors, the local MP. I'm going to be talking to veterans as well to get why it means so much to them. But before that, I'm going to be talking to Mark White. In fact, I'm going to go there now. Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, talking about the situation in Paris, because I believe that police have opened fire on a woman suspected of making death threats and speaking in support of terrorism. Concerning stuff. Mark, what's the latest?
Well, this was an incident that unfolded on a train service from the eastern suburbs of Paris into the city. Reports from members of the public who called the police that this woman was going around the carriage shouting Allahu Akbar, and also, as you say, reports as well that she was shouting Free Palestine, claiming that she had a bomb and she was going to detonate it. Police attended the scene. The woman was clad in a veil, completely veiled, and the police couldn't see whether she was carrying a device or not. They instructed her to follow their orders, obviously, to get down on the ground, and you know, they would be able to search her. They said that she was not compliant and that they feared for her safety, their safety, because she was claiming that she would explode the device that she had. So they opened fire. We're told that 8 shots were fired. The woman suffered very significant injuries and is critically ill at this hour. She's a 38-year-old woman that we know the details, Patrick. She was on apparently a radicalisation watch list for a while. Not an awful lot of other detail about that, except that there's now 2 investigations underway, one into what on earth the woman was doing, the other into the police course of action and whether there was any other course of action that was open to them other than opening fire on this woman. But France has been on a heightened state of alert, as have many countries in the West, since the attacks on October the 7th, particularly after an attack on October the 13th in Arras in northern France, where a teacher was stabbed to death. That was linked to this conflict. The Interior Minister in France says there have been more than 800 anti-Semitic crimes that have taken place in France since those attacks on the 7th of October.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Mark, thank you very, very much. That's Mark White there, our security editor, filling you in on the very latest, very concerning scenes in Paris. And yet again, somebody who is believed to have been on a radicalisation watch list. How many times does this have to happen? And I think it's worth bearing in mind that Rishi Sunak has also cautioned people to expect an attack here in this country in light of what's going on with Israel and Hamas. We continue to see protests, of course, every single Saturday now, it appears, on the streets of Britain. And I would be lying if I said that wasn't part of the reason why we're here doing this kind of show here today, to raise money for the Royal British Legion. We're seeing the cenotaph fenced off, aren't we? And we're seeing quite a lot of clashes on the street. So I thought, just in the run-up to Remembrance Sunday, is there something we can do to raise money? And indeed there is, because we've set up a Just Giving. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. Now we're now up to 104,000. When I come back, I'm going to be speaking to Anne Meadows, who is a councillor here at Brighton and Hove, to talk about why the Royal British Legion means so much to this area and why we should be showing our veterans a lot of love, not just at this time of year, but throughout it. But now, it's your headlines.
It's 3:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Israeli forces have confronted Hamas gunmen inside the vast network of tunnels beneath Gaza. They're battling to secure the release of hostages as a ground assault on the besieged enclave intensifies. It comes as Israel's Prime Minister dismissed calls for a ceasefire, saying that it would mean surrendering to terrorism. More than 8,300 people have been killed by Israeli attacks in Gaza. Former chief advisor to Boris Johnson says the government had no plan to help vulnerable people during lockdown. Speaking at the COVID-19 inquiry, Dominic Cummings argued that there was no effort to help these people. Mr Cummings says he realised mid-March there was no shielding plan at all, and the Cabinet Office was trying to block the creation of a shielding plan. Paris police opened fire on a woman suspected of making death threats and speaking in support of terrorism on a train into Paris. It's the latest security incident in the country that had been on heightened anti-terror alert since a fatal stabbing at a school earlier this month. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2132 and 1.1450 euros. The price of gold is £1,646 and 78 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,338 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, I always think we call it Great Britain because of the Great British public. You do put the great into Great Britain. And that's emphasised by what's happening literally right this second. Now, this time yesterday, pretty much, I decided to set up a Just Giving page to raise a bit of dosh for the Royal British Legion. It's proving difficult to find people to sell poppies, and I can understand it, of course. There's maybe a little bit less cash flying around, and it can often feel like there's more of a hostile environment in this country than there has been before. So we thought we'd try to step in a little bit here in Brighton, widely regarded by many as the wokest part of the UK. So we thought, well, we'd try to raise a bit of cash here as well. And you guys, GB News viewers, GB News listeners, have stepped up to the plate in a way that no one could have imagined. £104,000 and counting in just over 24 hours. JustGiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. And I am joined now, very gratefully so, by the wonderful Anne Meadows, who is a councillor at Brighton and Hove City Council. We are here, Anne, at Port Slade Royal British Legion. Why does the British Legion mean so much, do you think? Why does the poppy appeal mean so much?
It's about raising awareness of how men and women in this country and abroad put their lives on the line for us. They ensure and help us continue with our freedoms, and that's a powerful thing to do. But it's not only the men and women on the front line, it's those families that are left behind that are taking up the slack, and they need support too.
Absolutely, and this is part of what the Royal British Legion does. It can help with housing, it can help with mental health care, it can help for the families that Anne was talking about that. And I think all too often, Anne, from where I'm sitting, it can look a little bit like our brave servicemen and women can often seem like they're back of the queue, unfortunately, in their own country, and that it can be a real problem. And that's something that we're trying to change a bit, I think. Is that the way it comes across to you sometimes?
Sometimes it does. I sit on the Housing Committee and I question those type of things. I feel that the Act that came in November 22, we need to ensure in Brighton Hove that our policies and procedures are up to date and that they are being actively pursued when helping someone with a homeless situation, housing register.
How easy is it for homeless veterans to get on the housing ladder? I mean, I have spoken numerous times on my show about different councils, not here it must be said, different councils spending millions of pounds on housing stock that ends up going for people who say have just come from Afghanistan or from Ukraine. I'm not saying, of course, those people don't deserve housing, but I am saying that sometimes it feels as though Brits, especially British veterans, might have to jump through a few more hoops.
It can feel like that, particularly with the 5-year part where you need to be local for 5 years. That can go against anyone who's just come out of the armed services. It's about ensuring that there's parity and equity for those people, and they need to speak up. We need to help them speak up and say, we do need help. I realise that's a difficult thing to do, though.
It is, and it must be said as well that a lot of that does come from a deep-seated sense of pride that is drilled into the men and women that are in our armed forces, and I can completely empathise with this idea that you don't want to go and ask for help. It can be very difficult to adjust to Civvy Street. Just again, we've got that fundraiser now. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy, and the response to the GB News viewers and listeners here has been absolutely staggering. We've already got to 105,000 now pounds, and it is climbing by the minute. I would just one last thing from you, if that's okay. Ahead of Remembrance Sunday, what would you be saying to people who want to show a bit of pride and support for our armed forces at the moment? It can feel as though patriotism at times, I think, can be a bit of a dirty word sometimes.
It can do, particularly in these challenging economic times and challenging situations abroad. They can impact on us locally. I would say your Just Giving page is amazing, 105,000 in 24 hours. Wow. Just keep giving is the thing I would be taking to people.
Absolutely. This is the thing as well. I know that we're all in the middle of a cost of living crisis, and it's as difficult as it's ever been for people. We're paying more tax, I think, per person than we paid at the Second World War, for goodness sake. And yet so many of you have just given whatever you can, whether it's a fiver, like Danny's just chucked in a fiver, or whether it's £200 that people are giving. Claret's just given £50 seconds ago, and it means the absolute world. Whatever you can give, thank you. And Anne, can I just say a special thank you for you, because I know we kept you waiting for a little while there. So it's Anne Meadows there, a local council here in Brighton and Hove. But look, very, very topical this for us now, because we've been following RAF Scampton very, very closely. A story that should need no introduction here for regular GB News viewers and listeners. I'm going to take us to Ray Addison right now, our reporter, who's got the very latest, because two councils have got a High Court fight at the moment with ministers today over plans to house some asylum seekers on a disused military base. Ray's got the latest. Ray.
Afternoon, Patrick. Yes, two hearings are taking place at the planning court here at the Royal Courts of Justice, just behind my umbrella here in London on the Strand. Mrs. Justice Thornton is the judge presiding over these cases. We've got an injunction application from West Lindsey District Council. That's over those Home Office plans to house 2,000 migrants at RAF Scampton in Lincolnshire, of course, former home of the Dam Busters, and also Braintree District Council is fighting Home Office plans to house 1,700 single male migrants at Wethersfield Airfield in Essex. Now, both councils are claiming that the Home Office just simply doesn't have the necessary planning permissions. However, the Home Office is using something called the Class Q rule to bypass those planning laws. Now, what is Class Q, you might ask? Basically, it's designed to be used in an emergency or to avoid an emergency when planning is required. Now, Richard Wold, KC, is representing West Lindsey District Council, and today he told the judge that the decision to use RAF Scampton is unlawful and it should be quashed by the court. He says since that base closed in 2018, the council's actually put together a really ambitious £300 million redevelopment plan, and in doing so, they've already spent £370,000 of taxpayers' money on the proposals. Now, if the Home Office is allowed to use that site to house asylum seekers, then all of that money and all of the opportunities from that huge redevelopment will be lost. That's what he's arguing. Now, lawyers for both councils are also arguing that they're concerned that the Home Office is not being 100% accurate when it says how long migrants are going to be housed there for. They've been told 12 months. They say that they think that that is going to be much longer. They also say Class Q shouldn't be used. This isn't an emergency situation. There are other alternatives. Of course, there is another side to the argument. The Home Office, the ministers and Levelling Up Housing and Communities ministers are fighting the claims. Their QCs are saying that this emergency argument is actually misplaced. They say a judge has already ruled on this in previous hearings, and no evidence has been put forward to show that the previous ruling was inaccurate. Home Office, of course, as well saying, Patrick, that these sorts of surplus military sites provide cheap and orderly accommodation for migrants, those who arrive here in small boats, and it's better than spending taxpayers' money on expensive hotels. It's a 2-day hearing. Second day will be tomorrow.
Ray Anderson, thank you very, very much, reporting from that High Court hearing. We've been following that from the very start here at GB News, and we're going to see it through because it's an issue that a lot of you care about very, very dearly. Quick update now. We're up to £106,294 on the Just Giving page. We're trying to raise as much money as we possibly can to show a bit of true British patriotism, show our veterans that we love them, and to try and help out as much as we can ahead of Remembrance Sunday. In sharp contrast, I think, to a lot of people walking around at the moment who are doing their best to tear this country apart. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. You can always rely on the GB News viewers and listeners to come to the fore on massive issues when it matters most. But I'm going to be talking shortly about our dear King because he is on a trip to Kenya and it has brought our colonial past into sharp focus. Calls on him to apologise for things that, frankly, he had absolutely nothing to do with. We'll go to Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, very, very shortly. And you will be hearing from people out and about here in Brighton about what they think about the way that we honour our brave military heroes. I'll see you in a tick.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. Well, hello, it's Patrick Christys here. I am in Brighton for the GB News Poppy Appeal. We had an idea a couple of days ago in light of the kind of very tense atmosphere that's taking place in the country at the moment, to try to show a little bit of patriotism and show a bit of love for the people who make the ultimate sacrifice, or who are prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice for our great nation. That's, of course, our dear veterans. So we set up a Just Giving page, justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. And we found out that it's becoming increasingly difficult, apparently, for people in certain areas at the Royal British Legion to find volunteers to go out and do that Poppy appeal. So we thought we'd basically take the appeal to them. One of those areas was Brighton, which is why we're here. And you guys have come to the fore massively. We're up to £107,000 now, £107,700. We've got Anne, who's been in touch today. This is such an important cause. Norman's just chucked in a tenner. Brilliant idea. It's a pleasure to contribute to the campaign. There's a load of this coming in right now as well. Some of our viewers and listeners from abroad, like David, who's given €50. So thank you very, very much. But I went out and about earlier on and I spoke to the fair people of Brighton on that famous Brighton pier and chatted to them about whether they think we do enough as a country to remember our war heroes.
I don't think we do. I think we have to look at the Americans, how much they do for their veterans. Half of ours are sleeping on the street doorways. And they're unemployed. Once they come out of services, they're very hard to employ because their skills sector is, you know, probably not very compatible with a lot of things, which is a shame.
I think we should treat them with a bit more respect. I mean, you often see a lot of ex-veterans that become homeless and, you know, living on the streets. That's just wrong, completely wrong.
Not really, no. I think there's a lot more we could do. And if you look at what they do in America and how they honour and they respect their veterans, I think we could do a lot more in this country.
That was something we heard time and time again, actually. Look what they do in America. Look at how they treat their veterans. And I think if the measure of a country is how well you treat your veterans, unfortunately, maybe we are lacking behind here. Those issues of veterans' mental health, that issue of veterans' homelessness as well, are things that we're going to be covering a little bit later on in this show. Thank you very much for everybody who's been donating. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. Let's show the nation, really, that we do care for our veterans, despite what you might see from certain other media outlets. But let's go now to Cameron Walker, who's our royal correspondent, because the King's on tour, Cameron, isn't he? He's in Kenya. And it's not been without controversy, because there are calls for him to apologise for our colonial past and all sorts. How's it going? I heard he had some cool sunglasses on earlier.
Yeah, he certainly did, Patrick, at an urban farm looking at some chicks. It's been a very busy day for the King in Kenya. It's a very poignant visit. Of course, it's the place where his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, became Queen back in 1952. And it's also his first visit to a Commonwealth realm as sovereign as well. But he is, a little bit later on today, expected to, and I quote, acknowledge more painful aspects of Britain and Kenya's shared history, and that is talking about the Mau Mau uprising of the 1950s, the anti-British rulers movement of some Kenyans, which resulted in British colonialists killing, torturing or maiming an estimated 90,000 Kenyans. That's according to the Kenyan Human Rights Commission. Now, 10 years ago, the British government, Patrick, did actually pay out almost £20 million to 5,000 or so elderly Kenyans who experienced that abuse. And the British government, as far as they're concerned, drew a line under it. They have never issued a full formal apology. What they have done is expressed regret. And I suspect that is exactly what King Charles will be doing later on today. The reason being, the British government stance is that if you issue a full apology, it could, they fear, open a whole can of worms when it comes to more people demanding reparations. But there are people in Kenya who really want the King to apologise, particularly those descendants of the Mau Mau fighters. But the Kenyan government very much wants the state visits to be looking to the future, the trading relationships, the economy, and there have been some reports that young people in particular in Nairobi also want to be looking to the future and are questioning whether or not King Charles's visit is going to have any impact on the economy of Kenya and their chances later on in life and their employment prospects, because there is a huge youth unemployment problem in Kenya at the moment.
Absolutely. Cameron, thank you very, very much. That's our royal reporter there, Cameron Walker, for the latest from that trip to Kenya. What do you make of the King acknowledging our colonial past, acknowledging some of the issues there? Do you think that's correct, or do you think that he's going to be apologising for things that have got nothing to do with him and maybe you don't want to apologise for? Some people would say once you start apologising, then you never stop, do you? And it's never quite enough. Get the emails coming in thick and fast, as indeed we have. Sandra's been on. Thank you. gbviews@gbnews.com. He says, Patrick, this is about RAF Scampton. If that bait is going to be used for anyone, says Sandra, it should be for homeless ex-service personnel. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you, and that's certainly very on brand given what we're doing and where we are here today in Brighton. This is, of course, the GB News Poppy Appeal, and it has absolutely flown. Never in a million years. And I started this yesterday thinking that we would try to raise £10,000, which is the exact amount of money that was raised here in Brighton last year before they were initially unable to find someone to sell the poppies again. Well, now we're on, let me just refresh it, live on air right now, absolutely staggering, £109,067. This money is going absolutely through the roof. Thank you very much, Katie, who's just chucked 20 quid in. Babs has given us 20 plus 5 quid gift aid. Babs, cracking name, love to see it. Now look, I've got loads more coming your way in the next hour, okay? We're going to be talking to Major General Chip Chapman about some of the issues facing veterans. We're looking at homelessness, we're looking at the housing crisis. I'm also going to look at some other elements of British politics. Keir Starmer in hot water over his views on Gaza and Israel, and Rishi Sunak warning about a terror attack on the streets of Britain. We've just seen something in Paris that looks remarkably similar to that as well. Police shooting dead a woman making threats that she had a bomb. We'll go to Mark White for the latest on that. It's all to play for here at GB News, live in Brighton.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. This time tomorrow, Storm Ciarán will be arriving. There are many warnings in place for damaging gusts of wind, particularly on Thursday across parts of the south, and heavy rain. There's warnings tonight from this area of low pressure bringing more rain, but here comes the storm, as I say, really arriving during Wednesday night and then lingering throughout Thursday with amber warnings across parts of the south. We have Met Office yellow warnings in place for tonight and tomorrow across parts of Northern Ireland and the southeast for the heavy rain that moves in. The rain also spreading its way into southern Scotland through the night. Lots of showery rain coming into Wales and southern England too, and quite a breezy night. A mild night here, but another chilly one in northern Scotland, where most of the night will be dry. But it's going to be a very wet, a very different day tomorrow for the rain spreads in across Scotland. As I said, we have got warnings in place for the night and first thing in the morning for Northern Ireland and across the southeast. There will be a lot of spray and surface water on the roads for the morning rush hour. Pretty blustery here too. A gusty, blustery day with a mixture of sunshine and showers for most, staying soggy across northern Scotland. Temperatures at best getting into the teens. But here comes Storm Ciarán spreading up from the south and then spiralling in across the country during Wednesday night and lasting for most of Thursday. With the ground so saturated, we are likely to see further flooding issues. The strongest winds across parts of South Wales and southern England. Please check the Met Office website for details of all the warnings.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It's 4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and we are live in Brighton for the GB News Poppy Appeal, which so far, thanks to you wonderful, wonderful GB News viewers and listeners, has raised a staggering £108,000 in just over 24 hours. Who says that there isn't a patriotic majority out there? Hey, it's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. That's how you can give any amount of money you possibly can. So this hour, I'm going to be talking to Major General Chip Chapman about the way that veterans are treated in this country and why younger people don't respect our veterans as much as they should. Should more be being done in our education system? We're going to talk to a chap who had a war memorial vandalised in his hometown as well. Shocking lack of respect there. RAF Scampton, what's the latest? Will asylum seekers be housed on that disused military base? Of course, it's not the only story in town. Keir Starmer's in hot water, facing a Labour rebellion. I'm going to talk to a Labour Party councillor who's quit over his stance on Gaza and find out whether or not his view has changed. I'm going to be talking about the COVID inquiry latest as Dominic Cummings dishes the dirt, and very concerning incident in Paris. Police have shot a woman making threats to kill who was on a radicalisation watch list. So all of that coming your way very, very shortly after your headlines.
Patrick, thank you very much. This is the latest. Israeli forces have confronted Hamas gunmen inside the vast network of tunnels beneath Gaza. They're battling to secure the release of hostages as a ground assault on the besieged enclave intensifies. It comes as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dismissed calls for a ceasefire in the war, saying it would mean surrendering to terrorism. More than 8,300 people have been killed by Israeli attacks in Gaza. Mark Regev is a senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister. He told GB News Israelis shouldn't have to live under the threat of Hamas.
We refuse to go through the sort of attacks we've had to undergo over the last few weeks. We will never experience again what we did on October 7th, and we'll put an end to this terror kingdom on our southern border. We are committed to destroying Hamas, and at the same time, We are committed to providing civilian population of Gaza with humanitarian aid, and we're working very closely with the international community to do that.
Sir Keir Starmer has reaffirmed Labour's support for a humanitarian pause in the Israel-Hamas war. Speaking earlier today, the Labour leader said it was the only credible approach to the ongoing conflict. But he argued a permanent ceasefire could risk more violence in the region, giving Hamas a chance to carry out more attacks.
At every stage during this crisis, my approach has been driven by the need to respond to both these tragedies, to stand by the right to self-defence of any nation which suffers terrorism on this scale, alongside the basic human rights of innocent Palestinians caught once again in the crossfire.
Former chief advisor to Boris Johnson says the government had no plan to help vulnerable people during lockdown. Speaking at the COVID inquiry, Dominic Cummings argued there was no effort to help these people. Mr Cummings says he realised mid-March there was no shielding plan at all, and the Cabinet Office was trying to block the creation of a shielding plan. Describing a culture of uncertainty, he said the former Prime Minister was referred to by colleagues as the shopping trolley due to his tendency to change direction. Plans to close ticket offices at train stations have been called off. The Transport Secretary asked train operators this morning to withdraw the controversial proposal to shut offices in England. A public consultation received the largest ever response, with the RMT union saying respondents overwhelmingly opposed the closures. Mark Harper says the plan didn't meet the high threshold of serving rail passengers. XL bully dogs will be banned at the end of the year. From the 31st of December, it'll be illegal to breed, sell, rehome or abandon an XL bully dog. Existing owners will be required to follow a strict set of rules, such as ensuring the dog is muzzled and on a lead. Environment Secretary Therese Coffey says it'll put an end to a spate of fatal attacks in recent months.
We have listened to what the victims of attacks have said, and we've also listened to what owners have said. What's important, the overriding priority is to make sure we have public safety, and we know that the measures that we are taking, including the muzzling and other ways where people won't be able to sell, buy or breed a dog from the end of the year, means that we are confident that the number of attacks will absolutely come to an end, just as it did when we brought in similar regulations for pit bulls 30 years ago.
Flooding has hit parts of Northern Ireland, with people being warned to avoid travel. Storm Kieran's bringing strong winds and heavy rain to the UK. Parts of Newry and County Down have been left underwater after a canal burst its banks, with water levels in the city at unprecedented levels. The Met Office has issued a yellow rain alert across Northern Ireland from tonight until tomorrow morning, warning some communities may be cut off by flooding. And finally, pomp and pageantry were on full display this morning as the King and Queen touched down in Kenya for a state visit. Their Majesties were greeted in Nairobi by Kenyan President William Ruto. It's the King's first visit as monarch to the country, where his mother became Queen in 1952. The King paid his respects to Kenya's fallen heroes, military and civilian, at the tomb of the unknown warrior. He also visited a model farm, which serves as an information centre for the local community and also provides food for the hospital. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
Well, here we are in Brighton for the GB News Poppy Appeal, and never in a million years could I have imagined that the generosity of GB News viewers and listeners would get us this far. An appeal that started out just trying to raise £10,000 for The poppies for the Royal British Legion to show our veterans that we love them in these incredibly testing times. I don't know about you, but it's been making me increasingly angry, some of the scenes that we're seeing on Britain's streets at the moment. And you could be forgiven for thinking that if you are a patriot who cares about the military, that you maybe actually are on your own. Well, shock horror, you are not, because you have managed to raise so far a staggering £112,500. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. It's for the Royal British Legion to help our veterans with housing, with mental health care, to help their families and help them get employment as well as they adjust back to Civvy Street. But you know where I am now in Brighton? It's widely regarded as one of the wokest cities in the UK, which is why it actually brings me a special amount of joy to come here and raise loads of money for our armed forces. But I went out and about earlier on to that famous Brighton pier, OK? I wanted to speak to people and ask them whether or not they think the younger generation does enough to recognise the service of military heroes, and what could be done to try to get them to show a bit more love for them, really. Here we go.
Probably not, no. Probably do need a bit more education, yeah.
There isn't anything, the young ones are not taught about it anymore. There's no education on the war. I don't even think they learn about the war anymore in schools or anything, or universities.
When I was a kid, you learnt about World War I and World War II in school, and you looked at the poetry and things around it. You don't seem to do that so much anymore, and I think that's something that's missing in today's age.
I think they don't know history, they don't understand the past, the reason for the poppy and the Hague Appeal and the First World War and where it started and how much it does. I think more schools should be covering more of our past and not just destroying it and trying to be detrimental and embarrassed and apologising for things which have nothing to do with us.
I don't know what's going on with the education system. There's nothing to be ashamed of in this country. We should be proud of our veterans and we need to support that more, and that should be in our education system more.
Yeah, well, there you go. I think it is concerning, isn't it? I mean, I've reported on stories of some pupils burning the Union flag outside the school, and there does appear to be an astonishing lack of patriotism. The education system, I think, does more to teach kids about the wrongs of this country than the absolutely amazing achievements of it. And therefore, what's the point, I would argue, you know, if we aren't that happy breeding a generation of people who are proud to be here and love this country? I'm going to go to Major General Chip Chapman now, who's a former senior British military advisor as well to US Central Command, amongst many other things. Major General Chip Chapman, thank you very, very much. Well, firstly, how do you react to the news that GB News viewers and listeners have managed to raise a stonking £112,000 for the Royal British Legion in just over 24 hours? What do you think that says?
Well, I think people care, and it shows that people care, and we've got this connectedness of people who should care about these things. No man is an island, in John Donne's words, and we are diminished by the death of people if we don't care. And that's why, regardless of what happens in Brighton with a sort of council or something, you know, the empathy and understanding for the sacrifice of those who came before and those who still live with those traumas is something which should connect us all.
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to give a shout out to Louise, who's just put £5 in. Whether or not you put in £5 or £500, it all matters. It absolutely matters, and it's massively appreciated, because I do know that times are the cost of living crisis. So thank you very much. Justgiving.com/page/News Poppy. But Chip, let's chat about what I was asking some of the people of Brighton there, which is a concern maybe that the younger generations are not taught to have pride, maybe, in our military heroes, and maybe not taught the bravery and the stoicism and the achievements, frankly, that have allowed, through their sacrifice, have allowed the young people of this country to have the kind of freedoms and life that they enjoy.
Yeah, I think there's three parts to that. It's who are we, where did we come from, and what does this mean to our identity? And it's all those great values which are still really enshrined in the values and standards of the armed forces, which are the key things here. And it's the loss of those values which seems to be the main part of the erosion of society, where we've sort of breaking each other apart rather than coming together with all those things to do with integrity and honesty, matehood, sacrifice, all those key adjectives which define what military service and sacrificing for each other in times of need, when there is a just war to go and fight against evil in the world, which we see today in various theatres in the world today.
Look, I am here and I want to say a special thank you to the Port Slade Royal British Legion Club, who've opened their doors early for us, actually on a day, the one day of the week that they are normally not open. So a massive thank you to them for, a very short notice, making us feel so well here. And that is part of the veteran community, of course, that I know stick together and always like to do right by each other. But Chip, can I ask you, we're a couple of weeks away from the remembrance service on Sunday, walking past the cenotaph, that same cenotaph that's been barricaded off, that same street that has been the scene of so many protests and demonstrations taking place recently. Some of them absolutely fine, some of them definitely not. Tensions, I think, at boiling point in this country. How vital for you is it that the police do police what happens on the Saturday and the Sunday in a couple of weeks' time impeccably and make sure that our services and our remembrance isn't desecrated?
Well, it's absolutely vital. And of course, Cenotaph is sort of holy ground, really, for the military because it is the centre of the celebrations. But it's worth reminding ourselves that in terms of sacrifice, that the number of doubly thankful villages, that is those who didn't have someone killed in either the First World War or the Second World War, is tiny. And therefore, everywhere in the UK and actually in Ireland, there is a physical manifestation of the sacrifice of the last 100+ years, because there are only something like, I think, 30 hamlets or small communities which lost no one killed in action in the First or Second World War. So you could drive back to London through any hamlet, village, and you would find a war memorial of which the cenotaph represents the centre of that. And by one of those bizarre fatalistic things, one of the places which didn't lose anyone killed in the First or Second World War is the inappropriately named Upper Slaughter in Gloucestershire. And just worth reflecting, because of the tensions we still have with Southern Ireland or Eire these days, that I believe that there was no community in Ireland that didn't have anyone who wasn't killed in the First World War or Second World War. So even though they're now a separate entity, people then did volunteer for the British Empire and to fight the evil of militarism of the Prussians in World War II, and of course Nazism, World War I, and Nazism in World War II.
Yeah, points well made there, Chip. Look, just while I've got you, can I ask you a question about a very current and a very real thing that our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said? He's actually said to expect some kind of terror attack at the moment. Is he urging us, do you think, to be vigilant there, or is he actually seriously warning that it's going to happen?
Well, I think we're always vigilant, and the key thing to look for is when JTAC, the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, raised the threat level based on any chatter, and that raising of the threat level would be based on intent, capability and timeframes, and that would lead to increased protective security measures from the police and other agencies involved in security. Now, the contest strategy, counter-terrorist strategy, only came out 3 months ago in July this year. That did tell us that the threat from terrorism was enduring and evolving. The events that we see over the last couple of weeks might suggest that it is evolving again, because grievances and ideology can power people to physical force acts which might not have happened before. And there's a melange of sort of issues that come together in what we would term salad bar terrorism, where you take an issue of Palestine, you take an issue of Hamas, you take an issue of what is potentially perceived as Israeli war atrocities. They all propel you to action. So it's that sort of melange of things which can be really, really dreadful for the future. And it's these lone actors, what is now called self-initiated terrorists, which are the most difficult to find, who can be powered by what they see on social media, the fractions of social media, and by the visual images that they see happening in the last 3 or so weeks.
Major General Chip Chapman, thank you very, very much. Now, just a quick reminder, GB News is here raising money for the Poppy appeal. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy, and we are now up to an astonishing £115,000. It's just going up by £500 increments every single time I look at it. But look, there's another story in town, OK? And that is the way that Keir Starmer has been handling the ongoing crisis and war between Israel and Hamas. Now, the Labour leader is facing a massive, massive internal battle here that could well prove actually to have a huge impact on the next general election. The Labour leader has said that he understands calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, but he argued that it was not the correct position at the moment, claiming it would embolden Hamas and risk further violence immediately. So we were speaking this morning, and Sir Keir Starmer said that a humanitarian pause in the conflict was the only credible approach. He called this conflict terrorism and brutality on a scale that few countries have ever experienced.
Make no mistake, this is terrorism on a scale and brutality that few countries have ever experienced. Certainly not this one. While I understand calls for a ceasefire at this stage, I do not believe that it is the correct position now, for two reasons. One, because a ceasefire always freezes any conflict in the state where it currently lies. And as we speak, that would leave Hamas with the infrastructure and the capability to carry out the sort of attack we saw on October the 7th. Our current calls for pauses in the fighting for clear and specific humanitarian purposes, and which must start immediately, is right in practice as well as principle.
So that's the Labour leader there, Sir Keir Starmer. Now, loads of Labour councillors have quit over this. I wonder how long it's going to be before we see potentially even front bench resignations, actually. I'm joined now by Amar Latif, who is a former Labour councillor at Oxford. Amar, thank you very much for joining us again here on GB News. Great to have you. So, you've just heard what Keir Starmer had to say there. Has that changed your view? Are you still going to be quitting Labour? You're not going to go back anytime soon?
Hi, Patrick. Thanks for having me on again. No, absolutely. I think his speech was very disappointing, and it's been a long time since I heard a national politician make a speech that's been quite so tone deaf. You know, over 3/4 of the British population in polling consistently say they would like a ceasefire. As you say, over 40 councillors now across the UK, Labour councillors have resigned, myself included, from the Labour Party. There have been endless resignations from the grassroots. Over half the shadow front bench is now calling for a full ceasefire. The London Mayor, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, the leader of Scottish Labour Party is calling for a ceasefire. And it just shows how out of touch Keir Starmer is by refusing to call for one and continuing with his calls for a humanitarian pause.
What I want to know, and I think a lot of people want to know, Amar, actually, is who on earth you and the potentially hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of other people like yourself who are feeling despondent at the Labour Party's stand over this. Who are you going to vote for?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. If you look at the latest polling of people who have said that they're not looking to vote for Labour, a significant proportion of those are likely not to vote. Some of those will vote for independent candidates. Indeed, I suspect that we will see a surge in independent candidates for the next general election. And it may well be that in some seats, those independent candidates win the seats. It may be in other seats where Labour have a very small majority that are actually losing significant numbers of votes to an independent candidate or people that don't vote is likely to lead to another party winning that's not Labour. I mean, I've seen and heard of some polling that's been going on that suggests that actually if the election was to be called today, about 45 constituencies, 45 seats, which Labour are banking on for the next general election, would not result in a Labour victory. So I think he is in trouble, and I think it's his doggedness in continuing to call for just a humanitarian pause that's likely to cause further problems. I'm speaking to a lot of Labour Party councillors across the country, activists and MPs, and many of those are telling me they're remaining in the party in order to see if he can change his position and change things from the inside.
can I just ask you, it's one quick one there, so I hope you don't mind me asking you. It's because it was a story we were covering yesterday. This application to the Electoral Commission has now been rejected, and I want to make that very, very clear. But there was an application that went in for a party of Islam. Now, they didn't publish a manifesto. It was just to say they were going to stand up for marginalised communities as they saw them across the UK. And I wondered whether or not you thought that if a party similar to that might actually do quite well.
Well, I think we live in Britain. Britain is a multicultural society. I don't think I would support a society that's based on a party that's based on just one religion. I serve the people of Oxford, Cowley. The ward that I serve is a multicultural society and a multicultural constituency. And I would encourage people to come together and not to define themselves based just on their religion, but the defining factors behind parties should be the principles by which people feel they can come together, and those principles in the past for the Labour Party have been international justice and peace, but it's sad to see that that's no longer the case.
Amal, thank you very much for your time again. Much appreciated. Take care. That's Amal Latif there, councillor, former Labour councillor, should be said, just reacting to what Keir Starmer had to say. I think Labour's in a bit of trouble. I mean, who would have seen this coming? But there we go. Right now, when I come back, I'm going to be taking you for the very latest from the High Court in that fascinating case at RAF Scampton, where asylum seekers were supposed to be moved into that disused RAF base. A historic site. Is it happening? Is it not going to happen? Oh, and just quickly, please get your donations continuing to come in. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. And if I refresh the screen in front of me right now, we are now up to £117,000 for the Poppy Appeal. Thank you very, very much, everybody. You are really a lovely bunch of people digging deep at this moment in time to show our veterans that you love them. I'll see you in a sec to talk about RAF Scampton.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. Welcome back. Here we are in Brighton for the GB News Poppy Appeal. Now, Brighton, many people say, has been described as the wokest part of the UK. And it may come as no surprise then that it was quite difficult, apparently, to find somebody initially to do some poppy selling here after a long-standing volunteer said that sadly they couldn't do it anymore. We thought we'd step in and fill that void. And so far, you wonderful people, GB News viewers and listeners, have now raised just shy of £118,000. An astonishing effort, showing how much you really care for the Royal British Legion that does so much work to help veterans find a home, get mental health care and get on the employment ladder. And we are here at the wonderful Port Slade Royal British Legion Club, which is doing great stuff hosting us here. So thank you very, very much. But to another issue that is affecting, well, historic veterans, left many people wondering why we can't house homeless veterans there now, but certainly it's got a lot of people going. It also ties in with the migrant crisis. It's what's going on at RAF Scampton, and we can go to Ray Addison, who's at the High Court for us, as this case rumbles on. So 2 councils have begun a High Court fight with ministers today over plans to house asylum seekers at a disused military base, and Ray has the latest for us.
Patrick, we've got 2 councils here arguing that fundamentally the Home Office just doesn't have the necessary planning permission to house asylum seekers on these disused military bases. And furthermore, they shouldn't be able to overrule that lack of planning permission using these wartime laws that have been put in place. The hearings, there's 2 hearings happening today and tomorrow at the Royal Courts of Justice. First up, the injunction application from West Lindsey District Council over those plans to house 2,000 migrants at RAF Scampton, of course, home of the dam busters, and also Braintree District Council fighting Home Office plans to house 1,700 single male migrants at Weathersealed Airfield in Essex. They're arguing against the use of this Class Q rule, which the government is using to bypass planning laws. Class Q is designed to be used in an emergency or to prevent an emergency. And of course, the council are arguing that this is just not a real emergency situation like it would be in wartime. Richard Wold, KC, is representing West Lindsey Council. He said it's unlawful to use RAF Scampton. He wants the judge to quash it. And he says that since the base was actually closed in 2018, the local council has actually put together a really ambitious £300 million redevelopment scheme, and they've spent over £370,000 of taxpayers' money developing that plan. And if the Home Office is allowed to use that base to house asylum seekers instead of this redevelopment plan, it's all going to go out of the window, and all the money that they've used, that they've spent so far, is just going to be turn out to have been wasted as well. Both councils say that they think that the Home Office is going to try and use these bases for longer than the 12 months that they've initially stated. As I said, they claim that there is no emergency. However, the Home Office ministers and the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities are fighting back. They're saying that this whole argument about the need for there to be an emergency it just isn't valid. They say another judge has already ruled on this in a previous case, and that nobody has put any evidence forward to show that that previous ruling is wrong. So 2 days of hearings. First day coming to an end here in a rather rainy London. Day 2 is tomorrow, and I'll be there.
everybody who's been donating, you can go to justgiving.com/page/GB News. Poppy, Ray Addison there with the latest on RAF Scampton. So thank you very much, everybody who's been getting in touch. So when I come back, we're going to be talking about the latest from the COVID inquiry, because Dominic Cummings has been giving an expletive-riddled string of evidence today. So we'll be discussing all of that. We're also going to be talking as well to a chap called Keith Campbell, who had a war memorial stolen from his local area. I mean, really, when you think people couldn't sink any lower, it turns out that they can. We are here trying to raise money for our dear veterans. I will see you at the other side of the headlines.
Patrick, thank you and good afternoon. It's 4:32. Boris Johnson's former chief advisor has told the COVID inquiry the government had no plan to help vulnerable people during lockdown. Dominic Cummings says he realised mid-March there was no shielding plan at all and the Cabinet Office was trying to block the creation of one. Israeli forces have confronted Hamas gunmen inside the vast network of tunnels beneath Gaza. They're battling to secure the release of hostages as a ground assault on the besieged enclave intensifies. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's dismissing calls for a ceasefire, saying it would mean surrendering to terrorism. XL bully dogs will be banned at the end of the year. From the 31st of December, it'll be illegal to breed, sell, rehome or abandon an XL bully dog. Existing owners will be required to follow a strict set of rules, such as ensuring the dog is muzzled and on a lead. For more on all of those stories, you can visit our website, gbnews.com.
Hello, welcome back everybody. It's Patrick Christys here. I am here in Brighton because we are doing our best to raise a little bit of money for the British Legion, the Royal British Legion's Poppy Appeal. And so far, thank you very much everybody who has managed to raise a staggering £119,000. Every time I refresh this, it's going up. justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. And the reason behind this is pretty simple. I know, like myself, a huge amount of people at the moment are feeling desperately concerned about the state of the country, and it's quite a volatile time, so I thought we'd try to show a little bit of unity and a little bit of British patriotism as well. And you guys have jumped on it, and people have got in touch here. £30,000 just come in. Sorry, £30, £30,000 would be mega, wouldn't it? £30 has just come in from Susan. Margaret's chucked in a tenner, and Darren's given a fiver. Thank you very, very much, everybody. That is justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. But matters very, very different now. We're going to be talking about the COVID inquiry because Boris Johnson's former chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, has been given, well, quite fruity evidence, to say the least, to the COVID inquiry. I believe I'm able to play you a little bit of this now.
So overall, I would say, I did say to the Prime Minister in December 2019 as the election was ending, overall, the system is completely dysfunctional. But within that, the Cabinet Secretary did make various important improvements, I think. A crucial part of my job was to say to the PM and to other people, if I thought that someone couldn't do the job, then to make that clear, because A, that's so fundamental to performance, and B, the issue is so often buried in Whitehall.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it does all feel a little bit hindsight 2020, doesn't it? It's clear that it was absolute chaos, but I just wonder whether or not they're doing all of this stuff in other countries. How do you feel? I don't know, maybe you feel as though we've absolutely got to get to the bottom of every single which way in which every single decision was made. Maybe you feel as though you couldn't go to the funeral of a loved one, or you had to sit apart from a bereaved relative, etc., and that was desperately galling. Maybe you had your weddings cancelled and all of this stuff. And I can completely understand that people are desperate to get to the bottom of it. But when you look at someone like Dominic Cummings, the chap who drove to Barnard Castle to test his eyesight, I mean, is he really the guy who should be pointing fingers now at Boris Johnson and saying you didn't know what you were doing, mate? I'm not convinced. And can you put yourself in the position of Boris Johnson as well? Plenty of people think he got it wrong. I mean, there were parties in Downing Street, weren't there, really? That's, I think, pretty clear. But Again, if you want to do one thing and you've got 20 people all around you telling you to do something else, eventually you do cave, don't you? Do you think it's time we moved on from all of this? gbviews@gbnews.com. I want to hear from you. But the main reason that we're here today and the main reason that we're doing this show today is for our Poppy appeal. I, like many others, have been very concerned about what we've been seeing since actually the invasion in Israel with Hamas, and seeing the violence and disharmony that's spewed out onto the streets of Britain. And for me, it's woken up, I think, some of the terrifying underbelly in British society. And as we gear up for Remembrance Sunday in a couple of weeks' time, on the 11th, that will be the Saturday. And every single Saturday, we're seeing protests in London. Violent clashes at times. We're seeing graffiti, we're seeing disgusting chanting, we're seeing racism, we're seeing a cenotaph barricaded off. And that, for me, is not Britain. That's not what we're about. That's not certainly the Britain that I want to live in. And I think that our armed forces are lost in this country all too often. They tend to be back of the queue when it comes to housing, back of the queue when it comes to mental health care, stigmatised for some of the things that split in the heat of battle. You look back for generations, don't you? And some of the actions in the Second World War, etc., are looked at through a different lens. Winston Churchill would ask that ridiculous question, is that man a hero or a villain? Well, he's a hero, obviously. Why would anyone think he's a villain? But this is the country that we live in, and I know that there is a patriotic majority out there, so I thought we tried to do something to show that. So GB News has been raising money for the Poppy Appeal, and it's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. And we're at £120,000 at the moment. I went out and about in Brighton here, where they've been struggling to find somebody initially to sell the poppies after a long-standing poppy seller sadly couldn't do it anymore. To find out what people think about the way that we treat and view our veterans in this country.
Probably not. No, I probably do need a bit more education. Yeah.
There isn't anything, the young ones are not taught about it anymore. There's no education on the war. I don't even think they learn about the war anymore in schools or anything, or universities.
When I was a kid, you learnt about World War I and World War II in school, and you looked at the poetry and things around it. You don't seem to do that so much anymore, and I think that's something that's missing in today's age.
I think they don't know history, they don't understand the past, the reason for the poppy and the Hague Appeal and the First World War and where it started and how much it does. I think more schools should be covering more of our past and not just destroying it and trying to be detrimental and embarrassed and apologising for things which have nothing to do with us.
I don't know what's going on with the education system. There's nothing to be ashamed of in this country. We should be proud of our veterans and we need to support that more, and that should be in our education system more.
Yeah, a lot of people feel very exercised about what they think is kind of anti-military, anti-British indoctrination of children in our schools. If you've got children going through the school system at the moment, are you seeing that? Are you feeling that? Get in touch, let me know. gbviews@gbnews.com. We're up to nearly £121,000 now on this Poppy Appeal. Absolutely blistering stuff. justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. But I've been told that there is a threat to life weather warning that has just been issued now, which sounds incredibly concerning, doesn't it? When I come back, we're going to be taking you to a couple of different locations across the UK that are battering down the hatches, preparing for desperately bad weather conditions. So make sure that you stay tuned.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best.
Bellissima.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Well, at the moment, unfortunately, we have a lot of clashes on the streets of Britain in relation to something that's taking place thousands of miles away in the Middle East. And when we see people doing things like chanting about jihad and calling about Muslim armies on the streets of Britain and all of this stuff, it's easy to forget, isn't it, that actually there is a majority of people in this country who do care about Britain, who do love it, and actually do have pride, especially in our own armed forces, which is why I am here in Brighton at the moment, trying to raise a bit of money for the Poppy Appeal. And so far, we've raised more than a bit of money. It's 122.5 grand now, people. JustGiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. We want to help with veterans' homelessness. We want to help with veterans getting back into work. We want to help with veterans managing to get the mental health care that they so dearly need as well. All too often in this nation, it feels as though people who have fought and served for this country are at the back of the queue, and we want to do our bit to change that. But it's tumultuous times on the streets of Britain at the moment. But I tell you what, it's stormy for a few different reasons as well. A threat to life weather warning has now been issued. Now I'm going to go to Jack Carson, our reporter, who's in Woodborough in Nottinghamshire. And I'm going to go to Doogie Beattie as well, as in Newry in County Down, to find out what's going on there and how bad things really are. It's all nice and warm and cosy for me here in the Portslade Royal British Legion bar. But Doogie, what's going on where you are?
Well, welcome to Newry, Patrick. This is, of course, where two massive water systems meet. The Clanry River behind me. If I just step out of the way a little bit, and you can just see the swelling of this river, and it meets the Newry Canal. The Newry Canal, one of the oldest canal networks in Britain, and that flows the whole way from Dungannon, Portadown, Armagh and through the city. And this morning it swole so high here that it burst its banks, flooding many of the premises behind us and destroying some of the businesses. And I spoke to one of the business owners just a short time ago.
Not great. We got the news last night, and there's no point in coming up here last night. So I come up here this morning to see what the damage was, and as you can see there, that's the 3 or 4 foot of water getting into the office if it's got in, and we can't get in to see what the story is. So depending how long we're out of business, everybody's prepared to work from home. Everybody has the computer set up at home, so that it's not too bad. But just the damage and the inconvenience.
Well, I spoke with that shopkeeper, and some of the organisations here, Retail NI and Hospitality Ulster, they have also now put out a statement asking for rates relief for those companies that have been hit. You've just got to remember that they came out of the back of lockdown working from home. And again, I caught up with Mickey Brady, the Sinn Féin MP for this area, and this is what he had to say.
Well, I've been around a long time. I've lived in Uri all my life. I've never seen it as bad. A number of years ago, the river was high, but I've never seen it as bad. I've never seen Sugar Island. Sugar Island's under 3 or 4 foot of water. Businesses have had to close. And in fairness, the council workers and the emergency services last night worked very, very hard to ensure that less damage was done than could have been done. But we've had a high tide now due in around midday, and people are trying to ensure that, you know, as many sandbags, etc., and as much protection is put for businesses and for residents as possible, you know.
Well, you can see from Mickey there, he's talking about a high tide. That tide is due back in within the next half hour, and worse to come, there's more rain due here at 5 o'clock. So these businesses will really be under more pressure.
Oh gosh, Doogie, make sure you don't get washed away. We do need you. Jack Carson joins us now. I'm going to enter the fray in Woodborough. Jack, what's the situation like where you are? A threat to live weather warning.
Yeah, good afternoon to you, Patrick. So, of course, this area of Woodborough in Nottinghamshire was really badly hit by Storm Babette. It certainly looks a lot different picture now behind me than it was just a short week ago when, of course, it was hit. And, of course, the prospect of any further storms, the likes of Storm Kieran coming in over the next few days particularly, is a worry for residents here because, of course, the ground here, businesses here, homeowners here have had very little time to recover from the previous storm. Of course, the previous serious flooding that was last year was 2007. They managed, of course, in that time to recover and to, of course, build themselves back up. But they've been meeting Mark Spencer, of course, their MP here as part of the Sherwood constituency, but also, of course, a minister within the Department for the Environment. So handy, of course, that he has one ear, of course, on the government's plan to try and help people out. Now, the government have come up with a plan, particularly for businesses and people that have had serious kind of coping issues with, of course, the floods, particularly around kind of flood defences as well. The government is saying that they flooded households in affected areas can apply for up to £500 per household. And when it comes to those flood-hit property owners and businesses as well, they can apply for up to £5,000 as part of the Property Flood Resilience Repair Grant Scheme. That's a grant, so it's not a loan that they're going to have to pay back to try and, of course, make sure that in future their homes are more resilient, of course. But I spoke to him, Mark Spencer, the MP here, after that meeting with residents. Here's what he told me in his assessment.
A really constructive meeting, actually, with some practical suggestions about what we can do working with the Environment Agency and with the local county council. So I think we can go away and look at some of those things, but I think we need to continue to support communities, continue to invest in flood infrastructure as we have been over the last decade. We've all got a role to play in that in the community, but obviously my role as the Member of Parliament here is to try and coordinate that approach so that we get the Environment Agency, local authorities and the government pulling in the same direction, which is what we've made huge strides locally, but that doesn't mean to say we can't continue to do more.
Yeah, of course, I was in that meeting. It was very constructive within the residents here. But, of course, the key issue raised was communication. And going ahead, of course, as more rainfall is expected over the coming days, that communication is key. And, of course, we all remember the government testing their emergency system that in cases of serious flooding, it would alert residents. That wasn't the case here last week with Storm Babette. But hopefully, in the future, that's something that the communication, if it can be worked on, residents not only here but around the country as well, will be better prepared and more alert if there is a serious situation coming their way.
As well, and take care of everybody who is in those areas. Look, we are here at the moment in Brighton because this is one of the areas where they had struggled initially to try to raise a bit of money for the Poppy Appeal. We thought we'd try to step in and help out. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy, and we have now gone over £126,000, which is amazing. Look, I've got a guest on at the moment, which is we're going to talk to Keith Campbell, who is a chap who is in Wokingham in Berkshire, who sadly had a memorial to our veterans desecrated. All of that is coming your way very shortly.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. This time tomorrow, Storm Ciarán will be arriving. There are many warnings in place for damaging gusts of wind, particularly on Thursday across parts of the south, and heavy rain. There's warnings tonight from this area of low pressure bringing more rain, but here comes the storm, as I say, really arriving during Wednesday night and then lingering throughout Thursday with amber warnings across parts of the south. We have Met Office yellow warnings in place for tonight and tomorrow across parts of Northern Ireland and the southeast for the heavy rain that moves in. The rain also spreading its way into southern Scotland through the night. Lots of showery rain coming into Wales and southern England too, and quite a breezy night. A mild night here, but another chilly one in northern Scotland, where most of the night will be dry. But it's going to be a very wet, a very different day tomorrow for the rain spreads in across Scotland. As I said, we have got warnings in place for the night and first thing in the morning for Northern Ireland and across the southeast. There will be a lot of spray and surface water on the roads for the morning rush hour. Pretty blustery here too. A gusty, blustery day with a mixture of sunshine and showers for most, staying soggy across northern Scotland. Temperatures at best getting into the teens. But here comes Storm Ciarán spreading up from the south and then spiralling in across the country during Wednesday night and lasting for most of Thursday. With the ground so saturated, we are likely to see further flooding issues. The strongest winds across parts of South Wales and southern England. Please check the Met Office website for details of all the warnings.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Good afternoon. You're still watching and listening to the Patrick Christys Show. I'm Emily Carver and I am in the studio. Now, we're having huge amounts of emails coming through on Patrick's Poppy Appeal live from Brighton. Huge numbers of you have already donated to this wonderful cause. I'm just refreshing my laptop because I want to get the very up-to-date figure that we have now accrued, £128,077, and this is just since Patrick's show began yesterday afternoon. So since yesterday at 3 p.m, £128,000, and that's from 8,232 supporters, individual donations from across the country. All of you lovely GB Views listeners and viewers, digging into your pockets, your hard-earned money, going straight to the British Royal Legion. Such a fantastic, fantastic cause. Now, lots of you have also been getting in touch on email, not just donating to our fundraiser, but also getting in touch with your experiences. Nick's got in touch. He says, "Hi, Patrick and crew. I'm a veteran and I want to say what an excellent effort you have made to raise 120k plus for the RBL. You are a diamond geezer," he says. I think he's referring to Patrick, of course, there. He says, "The Legion helped me when I left after 22 years of service. They helped me get mental health treatment through combat stress charity, and they also helped me with legal advice so that the military admitted that my service had contributed to PTSD." Well, there's just a snippet of why the RBL is such a fantastic cause, helping veterans. We know, all of us know, how difficult it is for those who have served to sometimes get a job, to deal with mental health issues and so on. So the fantastic amount of money that we are raising, and we will continue to do so, will go towards helping some of our veterans. And of course, we have troubling times at the moment, and isn't it just nice to show some patriotism and support for people who may have given, and to their families who may have given their lives and served for the benefit of this country. It's always worth remembering, particularly at this time of year. So please do keep donating to our fundraiser, of course, but also getting in touch with any of your own experiences or your families. Thank you very much indeed. Before we get back to Patrick, we're going to go to the news headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you very much. It's 5 o'clock. This is the latest. Dominic Cummings warned Boris Johnson of the NHS imploding like a zombie apocalypse film during the pandemic. Speaking at the COVID-19 inquiry, the former advisor to the then Prime Minister said he called for daily crisis meetings, fearing the crisis was coming quicker than expected. Mr Cummings also said the government had no plan to help vulnerable people during lockdown. Describing a culture of uncertainty, he said the former Prime Minister was referred to by colleagues as the shopping trolley due to his tendency to change direction. Sirens have sounded across Tel Aviv as Hamas launch another rocket attack. Explosions have been seen and heard as the city suffers its second major rocket barrage of the day. It comes as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dismissed calls for a ceasefire in the war, saying it would mean surrendering to terrorism. More than 8,300 people have been killed by Israeli attacks in Gaza. Mark Regev is a senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister. He told GB News Israelis shouldn't have to live under the threat of Hamas.
We refuse to go through the sort of attacks we've had to undergo over the last few weeks. We will never experience again what we did on October 7th, and we'll put an end to this terror kingdom on our southern border. We are committed to destroying Hamas, and at the same time, we are committed to providing civilian population of Gaza with humanitarian aid, and we're working very closely with the international community to do that.
It comes as 50 Palestinians have reportedly been killed, 150 injured in a suspected Israeli airstrike on Gaza. The director of a nearby hospital in Gaza says the attacks hit a densely populated area of a refugee camp in the north of the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military have not commented. Sir Keir Starmer has reaffirmed Labour's support for a humanitarian pause in the Israel-Hamas war. Speaking earlier today, the Labour leader said it was the only credible approach to the ongoing conflict. Protesters demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza crowded the Labour leader's car as he left Chatham House. But in his speech, Sir Keir argued that could risk more violence in the region, giving Hamas a chance to carry out more attacks.
At every stage during this crisis, my approach has been driven by the need to respond to both these tragedies, to stand by the right to self-defence of any nation which suffers terrorism on this scale, alongside the basic human rights of innocent Palestinians caught once again in the crossfire.
Plans to close ticket offices at train stations have been called off. The Transport Secretary asked train operators this morning to withdraw the controversial proposal to shut offices in England. A public consultation received the largest ever response, with the RMT union saying respondents overwhelmingly opposed the closures. Mark Harper says the plan didn't meet the high threshold of serving rail passengers. XL bully dogs will be banned at the end of the year. From the 31st of December, it'll be illegal to breed, sell, rehome or abandon an XL bully dog. Existing owners will be required to follow a strict set of rules, such as ensuring the dog is muzzled and on a lead. Environment Secretary Therese Coffey says it'll put an end to a spate of fatal attacks in recent months.
We have listened to what the victims of attacks have said, and we've also listened to what owners have said. What's important, the overriding priority is to make sure we have public safety, and we know that the measures that we are taking, including the muzzling and other ways where people won't be able to sell, buy or breed a dog from the end of the year, means that we are confident that the number of attacks will absolutely come to an end, just as it did when we brought in similar regulations for pit bulls 30 years ago.
Flooding has hit parts of Northern Ireland, with people being warned to avoid travel. Storm Kieran's bringing strong winds and heavy rain to the UK. Parts of Newry and County Down have been left underwater after a canal burst its banks, with water levels in the city at unprecedented levels. The Met Office has issued a yellow rain alert across Northern Ireland from tonight until tomorrow morning, warning some communities may be cut off by flooding. And pomp and pageantry were on full display this morning as the King and Queen touched down in Kenya for a state visit. Their Majesties were greeted in Nairobi by Kenyan President William Ruto. It's the King's first visit as monarch to the country where his mother became Queen in 1952. The King paid his respects to Kenyans' fallen heroes, military and civilian, at the tomb of the unknown warrior. He also visited a model farm, which serves as an information centre for the local community and provides food for the hospital. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio, and now on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
In Brighton, and I must say we are having an absolutely wonderful time here because we're raising so much money. You are raising so much money. You wonderful, wonderful, very generous people. We're up to £130,000 now. If you're just joining us and you're wondering what on earth I'm talking about, well, it's got everything to do with this thing I'm pointing at on my chest right now, and it is the poppy. And we are here at the Portslade Royal British Legion Club, which is doing a tremendous job hosting us, so thank you very, very much. We are trying to raise money for the Royal British Legion for a variety of different reasons, OK? It is, of course, Remembrance Sunday coming up. More than that, though, I think there are situations in this nation where it can feel like veterans can be at the back of the queue for a variety of different things, whether it's housing, whether it's mental health, or whether sometimes it's a little bit of a help getting on that employment ladder. So justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy, that's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy, is going great guns at the moment. And I just want to give a little bit of a shout out to a couple of the people who've just donated. Carol's chucked in a tenner plus a bit of gift aid. Michael says, I hope this helps with £20. Well, it certainly will, Michael, thank you. And Doreen says, so's pleased to help just a little. Well, it's not just a little, it's 10 quid, which is, I think, a heck of a lot for most people, especially given the current economic climate. So thank you so, so much, everybody. It's important, I think, that the patriotic majority make our voices heard every now and again, don't you? But look, I was out and about on the famous Brighton Pier seafront earlier on, getting battered a little bit by the elements, asking people whether or not they thought that we did enough to remember our heroes.
I don't think we do. I think we have to look at the Americans, how much they do for their veterans. Half of ours are sleeping on the street doorways. And they're unemployed. Once they come out of the services, they're very hard to employ because their skills sector is, you know, probably not very compatible with a lot of things, which is a shame.
I think we should treat them with a bit more respect. I mean, you often see a lot of ex-veterans that become homeless and, you know, living on the streets. That's just wrong, completely wrong.
Not really, no. I think there's a lot more we could do. And if you look at what they do in America and how they honour and they respect their veterans, I think we could do a lot more in this country.
OK, so like I said, here we are at the Portslade Royal British Legion Club, very gratefully so, and I am very pleased to be joined by the Labour MP for Brighton. It is Lloyd Russell-Moyle MP. Thank you very much for joining us. Great to have you on the show. So, first and foremost, what do you make of Poppy Day? What do you think about the fact that we've managed to raise, anyway, our viewers have managed to raise about £130,000? Not a bad effort. I think that's a remarkable effort, and all credit to you guys and to your viewers who have raised that amount of money. But this happens across the country at a smaller scale, whether it's people who are not rattling but who are holding the tins on our streets, or, you know, for example, I always do a collection at the Asda store in my constituency, and that's for people with poppies, and that's to remember, I think, not just the fundraising, which is important, and I've put down a number of parliamentary questions about why the wreaths have VAT on them, for example, because I think it's a disgrace that the wreaths have VAT on them, poppies don't. But why should 20% of that be going to the taxman when I think most people expect it all to be going to the British Legion? Is important not just to raise money, but to remember, and not remember just the people who sacrificed themselves in long ago wars, but more recent conflicts as well that we've had. Now, you can have arguments about whether people should be sent to war or not, but once they are committed and they are doing a duty for all of us, then we must, I think, remember and respect the role that they played. Do you think there's danger in this country at the moment that we have a generation, possibly a couple of generations, who haven't known a war close to home, who haven't maybe known the suffering that some of the older generations had to go through, and maybe don't appreciate the sacrifice that was made?
Yes, I think that sometimes what can happen is people who haven't really themselves been through war start to think that war's an easy thing. War is something that we can just press a button and be done with it. And I think that actually most people who lived through and served in the First and Second World Wars knew what horror it was, knew what horror war was, how it destroyed people, it destroyed families, and it was no good in the end. You know, kind of there was no good out of war. The only good was that people died and you know, families were ruined. That's no good at all. And that's why, of course, after the Second World War, all of these charters of human rights, the Council of Europe, eventually even the European Union with the Coal and Steel Union, were designed to make war much harder, because those people who had lived through it said we need to make it impossible for future generations. They might forget the harm, but we need to integrate them economically and politically, and integrate people in such a way that they have to be bound by UN standards, so that war becomes harder. Now, it will never be impossible, but that's why that generation did it. And I think our job to respect that generation, not just respect those people who have served, but to respect the institutions and the foundations that they laid, because they said never again, and we must respect that.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we can fundamentally not let anything like that happen ever again. We hope it won't. That's not to say it won't, but we hope it won't. We do live in turbulent times. I wonder what you make, certainly, of the difficult job, and it is a difficult job that Keir Starmer has got at the moment, a very delicate balancing act with what's going on in Israel and Gaza, treading a fine line. One of the reasons, I'll be honest with you, obviously one of the reasons why we were doing this and going big on it at the moment is because of some of the concerns that we had around protests in London and about the Senate staff being barricaded off, and concerns about in a couple of weeks' time when we get Remembrance Sunday and the day definitely going to be protests around London as well. Doing a decent job at the moment, not calling for, you know, an immediate ceasefire, calling for that kind of humanitarian blockade. Where are you on this?
Well, on some of the points, I don't think that I would be surprised if there are demonstrations on Remembrance Sunday or the Armistice Day Saturday beforehand, and I would see that probably in poor taste if they were outside the cenotaph. Those 2 days, the cenotaph is used for. But we must remember the cenotaph is opposite 10 Downing Street, and so political protests will always happen there. That's where they should happen. It's quite right, they do happen outside there. But on Remembrance Sunday and on Armistice Day, clearly that site needs to be used for something else, and it would be inappropriate, I think, for protests to happen in that location. And I don't think anyone would want to. I think on Keir, I think that we're getting a bit too worked up on the word ceasefire and humanitarian pause. Personally.
Okay, go on.
And I think Keir's getting too worked up on it in one way, and I think the people on the other side are getting too worked up on it the other way. What do we want? We want the firing on both sides to stop temporarily, so that there can be a humanitarian support. There can be some more negotiations, because there are already negotiations for some of the hostages to be released. Now, if that pause turns into a longer pause, we call it a ceasefire. If it breaks down, we call it a humanitarian pause, don't we? But we know sometimes even things that you call ceasefires break down. So the idea that we're having a quibble, I think so. Yeah. I think what we want is we want the fighting, immediate bombing on both sides to be paused. We then want a set of clear demands that come out of that, which is the hostages have to be released. You know, kind of we have to get humanitarian aid in, and then the next level is that we want a kind of two-state solution. We want, and at each one of those stages, there is a danger that a ceasefire or humanitarian pause, whatever you want to call it, breaks down because either side says, well, you're not honouring it. Israel, of course, will want to see the disbanding of Hamas. That will be one of their conditions. And if that didn't happen after a day or two, then clearly the ceasefire ceasefire would break down. Whether we call it a ceasefire or whether we call it a humanitarian pause, the Prime Minister wants a humanitarian pause.
I get it.
The UN wants a humanitarian pause. Let's have the humanitarian pause.
But it matters to a lot of your councillors and a lot of voters in a lot of, let's be honest with you, seats with a high Muslim vote. And they're not voting for you anymore over this.
Well, of course it matters to them, because just like we understand that Jewish people have a particular connection to Israel, Muslim people have a particular connection to Palestine. You know, Jerusalem is the third holiest site in Islam, and it is inextricably linked to British Muslims' identity. And so you cannot say you treat the Palestinians badly, but it's got nothing to do with how British Muslims will feel. It is the same as a British Jew would feel with Israel, a British Muslim would feel with Palestine. That's how you have to approach it. And so you have to have sympathy and compassion for both people that are hurting on both sides.
And you do think that in a couple of Saturdays' time, which will be the 11th of November, that it would be in poor taste for there to be any demonstrations about what's going on in the Middle East around London, around that cenotaph?
I think around the cenotaph, it would be of poor taste to demonstrate in the kind of demonstrations. And I say that on both sides. I think it would be in poor taste for people to show a demonstration in support of Israel's actions as well. I think demonstrations, political demonstrations, on Armistice Day.
Yeah.
Well, yes, exactly. On Armistice Day, we should. The point is to pause and to say, hang on a second. Let's remember the horrors of war, and let's try and find. That's not saying that you never then use violence, because sometimes it will be needed, you know, to stop greater violence. But generally, we try and find negotiated routes out. And I think a humanitarian pause, a ceasefire, whatever you call it, an immediate stop of firing, and then we go from there. That's what we need.
I think a lot of our viewers will be really reassured to hear what you said there, because I know huge numbers of them are deeply concerned about the potential for what it might mean to have protests or demonstrations.
Has anyone said that they want to protest on that day?
Well, it's the fact that it's continuing to happen on a Saturday.
No, but yeah, I do suspect sometimes we also must not talk ourselves into a position of thinking something.
Fair enough.
Unless someone has said, I think we should assume that it's not going to happen.
I think it's the concern that it might, but I'm just going to delve quickly into...
Many Muslims and Sikhs were treated in the First World War here in Brighton in the pavilion, because this was the place where all Indians were treated. We have graves full of Muslims who fought for Britain in the First World War, and we have remembrance pyres where people were the Hindus were burnt, of course, because that's their religion, that they have to be cremated. Up just on the mount, just on the hill up this road. People in Brighton will know that Muslims, Sikhs, and Indians sacrificed a lot, and they are part of that remembrance as well.
Okay, all right, and just quickly, you were talking yesterday, I believe, about the Bibby Stockholm barge, which is an issue that I know a lot of our viewers and our listeners care strongly about. I wonder if we might be able to have a little clip of some of the things that you were saying there about it that I might be able to throw to in just a second, if possible. But I know that you certainly don't feel that the Bibby Stockholm barge is appropriate. I did listen to this clip earlier on, and correct me if I'm wrong, but did you think that the basketball court was too small?
No. What I said is that all the recreational facilities have been taken away. So, for example, they've confiscated all the basketballs. They've taken away all the weights. Now, each individual thing on its own makes no difference. But if you have a group of eventually 500 men with nothing to do, nothing to occupy themselves, I'm afraid those kinds of things are recipes for disaster. You know, kind of 500 men sitting around for months, if not maybe some of them years. And bearing in mind the Bibby Stockholm, it's hugely expensive. It's more expensive than putting people up in some of the cheaper hotels, in fact. And at one point, there were 25 guards for 30 people on that barge. The barge is in a port where there is no hospital, there is no adult education centre, there is no, the hospital shut during COVID. The local people are one of the most, it's one of the most forgotten towns in our country. The Royal Navy withdrew 20 years ago, and there's been nothing to replace it. And suddenly putting a barge with up to 500 men in that location without the services is wrong. And the men that I spoke to, and they are predominantly men, of course.
Would you put them somewhere around here then?
Well, yes, we could have them here, but actually, on a barge...
So you would offer to put them here?
But on a barge, on that particular barge, and on a barge more generally, I don't think is necessarily appropriate. I think people should be spread across the country in proper accommodation. These men that came had not come on boats, let's be clear. They had come via aeroplane from Iran, fleeing the protests when they had supported their wives and their other women who were protesting against the barbarity of Iran. And of course we know Iran is behind some of the other stuffs that we've got in the world at the moment. So these were not illegitimate claims, and what we want is their claims to be seen quickly.
Processed yet, have they?
No, we want their claims to be done quickly. That's why Labour will employ 1,000 more processors to get them quick, and if they should be here, get them to work. And if they shouldn't be here, then we send them back. But this whole myth that they come on boats is not what they had come by.
How are you going to be able to send them back when the Conservatives haven't?
Well, the Conservatives have predominantly been able to send people back who have had their claims then heard. The problem that arises is the longer someone stays here, so the longer it takes for you to process your claim, the more likelihood is that they have roots here. They suddenly have a family.
Well, how does someone suddenly have a family, to be fair? They're trapped on a prison barge and you go out and all of a sudden you suddenly have a kid.
They're not trapped in a prison barge because it would be illegal to put them in prison. They are on a barge where they can come and go, or they're in hotels where they can come and go. But what happens is the longer that you are here, sometimes for 2-3 years, of course you get then local roots. And then it's much harder to take people away, you know, to say you were illegitimately here because you have got legitimate claims. Whereas if you process people quickly, fairly, sometimes not even in the UK, my view is there should be a processing centre in France. So you say to people, oh, you've arrived here in Britain, terribly sorry, the processing centre's back in Calais. We'll put you on the coach, the next coach, and we'll take you to the processing centre, all fair and free. And that processing should happen in a matter of weeks or months. I really do not understand how it takes longer than that, because often the evidence is not being gathered. It's just there aren't enough people to process these things. And then you can say to people fairly. I think the British people want fairness. And also, they don't want to be spending £8 million a day on barges and hotels, which is a complete waste of money.
We certainly don't. I am very grateful for your time, covering a range of topics there. It is much appreciated. Thank you very, very much. Seriously, that's Lloyd Russell-Moyle there, MP. He's Labour MP for Brighton. Thank you very, very much. Just a reminder, justgiving.com/page/GBNewsPoppy is the email address that you can go and donate a little bit as well. And I say a little bit, we're up to £136,000 now, which is mega stuff. So thank you, everybody, for the Royal British Legion. Look, I've got a lot coming your way. We're going to be hearing from Keir Starmer. He's tying himself in knots a little bit, or maybe that's a bit unfair, over what's going on in Gaza. We're also going to be talking as well to an individual who sadly had their shop window desecrated. They had a war memorial in their shop window. There really are some lowlifes out there, aren't there? All that coming your way, and much, much more with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back to Brighton. You're with me, Patrick Christys, here on GB News. And we are raising a bit of money. I say a bit of money, quite a lot of money as it's turned out for the Royal British Legion. That's all thanks to you wonderful people, the GB News viewers and the GB News listeners, raising it for the Royal British Legion. Of course, we do live in quite touchy times out there at the moment, and this is a tremendous opportunity for you to all show how much we care as a nation about our brave veterans and military heroes. And so far, we have raised £137,329, and that is in, what now, about a day and a half. So give yourselves a big pat on the back. Thank you so much. It really does show how much people really care about this nation, about our history and about our brave veterans. Staggering, staggering stuff for the Poppy Appeal. But I'm going to go now to Mark White, who's our security editor, because Keir Starmer has been talking, and Keir Starmer has been trying to clarify his party's position on calling for a ceasefire or not calling for a ceasefire with Israel regarding Hamas. And Mark has the very latest for us because, let's be honest, Keir Starmer is desperately trying to fight fires all over the place here. And we've got councillors resigning. We've got apparently rumblings of people on the front benches quitting as well. Mark, what is the latest?
Well, it's certainly possible that there could be more in the way of sort of response to Keir Starmer's speech today in terms of perhaps resignations from the shadow cabinet. He is sticking to his guns, though. He is not calling for a ceasefire. He is calling for humanitarian pauses to allow more in the way of aid trucks into Gaza. Now, he clarified his position on a ceasefire. Gave his most detailed argument for the reason why we shouldn't have a ceasefire to date. He said that a ceasefire would effectively freeze the situation in terms of both the IDF and Hamas. So in other words, Hamas would still have the capabilities that it currently has. Now, we know these capabilities are still very significant because the Israeli Defense Forces are coming under very significant fire in northern Gaza as we speak. And in fact, the latest breaking news is that 2 Israeli soldiers have been killed and another 2 have been seriously injured in that fighting. Elsewhere, multiple rocket attacks throughout Israel. In fact, pretty much every hour we get a new rocket attack. 2 major attacks on Tel Aviv today and on Ashdod in southern Israel as well, where 4 people were injured, one of them very seriously injured. So the Hamas group still has the capabilities, and what Sir Keir Starmer was arguing is that if you call for a ceasefire, they will see this as a victory. They will still have that capability. They will regroup and they will attack Israel again. So Israel is no safer, no better off. the only proper solution for Israel is to deal with Hamas at the moment, to have these humanitarian pauses to get as much help to the civilian population as possible. And so Keir Starmer says, give guarantees that there will be no long-term displacement of the Palestinian people, a thought that sends shivers down the spines of Palestinians. Instead, a guarantee that they will be allowed back into Gaza once the fighting is over, and a recommitment he wants to look further down the road, he admits, but to look at the possibility of some kind of agreement around a two-state solution, however far off that might be.
Absolutely. Now, look, Mark, quickly, just on the latest from Paris, because police shot a lady who we understand was on a radicalisation list, was she? What happened?
Well, an indication of certainly the real concern about the likelihood of terror attacks. This woman who was clad in a burqa had gone on to the train system from eastern Paris into the city. Some people had called the police because she was making threats, shouting Allahu Akbar, shouting slogans about Palestine and threatening to blow herself up. When the police arrived, she didn't obey their instructions and was shot multiple times. She is critically injured, and the police say she was on a radicalisation watch list. We should also say one more piece of breaking news. The FBI director has said that the threat to Western nations from the current conflict in terms of a terror attack is greater now than it has been since the rise of ISIS some 10 years ago.
OK, Mark, look, thank you very, very much. Concerning stuff indeed. Mark White there, our security editor, is with us in Tel Aviv, especially when it comes to the FBI there, saying that the terror threat is indeed increasing, something that Rishi Sunak has been saying to us about our streets as well. Now, this is a very, very weird and frankly quite disgusting story, so if you're having a dinner, I apologise. But Palestine protesters, pro-Palestine protesters, threw a box full of spray-painted mice into a McDonald's in Birmingham, which I understand that we are now showing you some footage of. Quite terrifying thing is customers at a Birmingham McDonald's branch absolutely stunned, as you would be, to be fair, because this box of mice was thrown into that. They were spray-painted red, white and green, which, of course, is the colour of the Palestinian flag, so making quite an entrance there. That footage is emerged on social media. The video was entitled, "Enjoy Your Rat Burgers." They're not rats, so aside from being disgusting, it's also factually inaccurate. But, yeah, they're saying that it's because McDonald's is supporting Israel. So that's the level we're at in this country, everybody. Makes you proud, doesn't it? There we go. Right, I've got loads more coming your way after the news. Make sure you stay tuned. And yes, we are, of course, here in Brighton raising money for the Royal British Legion. We are up to, let me have a quick check before I throw you over to your bulletins, £138,823. Staggering stuff, amazing scenes. Thank you. It's justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. It's all for the Royal British Legion. It's all for a great cause. It's all to show that we are proud of being British and proud of our armed forces. So thank you very, very much. But right now, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you very much. It's 5:32. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Boris Johnson's former chief advisor has told the COVID inquiry he warned the Prime Minister at the time of the NHS imploding like a zombie apocalypse film. He says he called for daily crisis meetings, fearing the pandemic was coming much faster than expected. Sirens have sounded across Tel Aviv as a barrage of rockets were launched by Hamas. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dismissed calls for a ceasefire in the war, saying it would mean surrendering to terrorism. Meanwhile, 50 Palestinians have reportedly been killed and 150 injured in a suspected Israeli airstrike on Gaza. The director of a nearby hospital in Gaza says the attacks hit a densely populated area of a refugee camp in the north of the Strip. In the UK, XL bully dogs will be banned at the end of the year. From the 31st of December, it'll be illegal to breed, sell, rehome or abandon an XL bully dog. Existing owners will be required to follow a strict set of rules, such as ensuring the dog is muzzled and on a lead. For more on all of those stories, you can visit our website, gbnews.com.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2146 and €1.1486. The price of gold, £1,638.17 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed at 7,321 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, here we are in Brighton. Many people regard it, of course, don't they, as the wokest place in the UK, which might be one of the reasons why the Royal British Legion said that they were struggling to find somebody to dish out the poppies for a while, but never fear, because GB News rocked up and we've done our bit, that's right. So thanks to you wonderful viewers and wonderful listeners, we have managed to raise £138,000 for the Royal British Legion and their poppy appeal, and we are in the Port Slade Royal British Legion Club. So thank you very, very much for opening up early doors for us on a day that they're not actually supposed to be open at all. Doing us a massive favour here to try and, well, rattle the can, really, aren't we, for the poppy appeal in very testing times for the country. They will be hosting their remembrance service of their own at East Hill Park near here at 10:30 a.m. on Sunday the 12th. It'll be an outdoor service. So if you're in the area in Brighton, make sure you come and show your face. Last year they had about 500 or 600 people, so cracking turnout. But there we go. Look, justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. That's justgiving.com/GB News Poppy. That's how you can donate. We've got about half an hour, no, 20 minutes left on this show now. We're on £139,000, which is amazing. But we are going to be talking now about some quite concerning stuff, actually. You know those posters that have been going up of the missing Jewish children and Jewish people, whether they've been kidnapped or they are just missing when it comes to what's been going on over there? Well, an investigation now is underway after a second set of police officers have been reported to pull down these posters from the walls. OK, so officers from Greater Manchester Police have been seen removing images of hostages, whilst the Met Police in London said that their officers took down posters in a bid to, get this, ease community tensions. It's amazing, isn't it? Doesn't it always appear to be certain groups of people giving way for others? Oh, why can't you have that Christmas market? Oh, because there's a threat there. Or why can't you say, oh, you don't want to stoke racial tensions? Or why can't I put this poster? We've got to ease community tensions. Well, hang on a minute. Why can't we just go about our lives like normal people? Mike Neville joins me now, ex-Metropolitan Police detective. Mike, thank you very much. Why are we easing community tensions and not just allowing posters of missing children to be put on walls in Britain?
I have no idea, Patrick, as to why this is happening. The posters don't contain any sort of hateful message. As I understand it, they have a picture of a child, and this child is missing. I'd like to know what consultation took place, because surely if the police are saying these posters are stoking racial tensions, then they would have had a meeting with the local imam, say, for example, the local rabbi, a local Christian vicars or whatever, and discuss this, or community leaders. But I don't think this has happened. It would seem to be officers doing this off their own bat. It doesn't seem to be sort of an organised thing, as this is something, doesn't seem to be anything organised by a senior officer. And as you've noticed, if those pictures were of Palestinian children, which it was claimed that the Israeli forces had dragged away and held hostage, would the police be removing them? I suggest they would not.
No, they absolutely wouldn't. They absolutely wouldn't. And we are seeing what many people regard as being police in action around the country at the moment, whether it's people climbing onto monuments, letting off flares. Frankly, I'm a bit sick and tired of seeing the Met Police especially put pictures up of someone holding a sign with complete racism on there or terrible words on there, or people chanting things about jihad and Muslim armies on the streets of Britain, and the police telling us that, look, don't worry everybody, we had specially trained officers on the scene, and what you thought you saw and heard there wasn't quite what you saw and heard there. We all know what's going on. Why are the police not getting involved? When they do get involved, they're tearing down posters. Why are they so afraid of one group of people, do you think?
I don't think it's fear at all, Patrick. I think it's a real consequence of who they've recruited over many years. And so the senior police officers are part of this liberal left blob that you see in every part of government, and even in some commercial industries where it's been wokeism has sort of taken over. So what you find, and I've said this several times, that if you have groups who are supporting, say, a fashionable liberal left cause like Black Lives Matter, Extinction Rebellion, pro-Palestinian groups, or people who go to the Notting Hill Carnival, they'll be policed in a very different way than anti-vaxxers, Christian preachers who appear at some LGBT event, or Millwall football fans. You know, so if you go to one place and if you act in the same way, it's a different event, you'll be policed very differently, and that is unacceptable in Britain, I would suggest.
Okay. Mike, put your police uniform back on for me for one last hurrah, because I want us to have a look ahead to a couple of weeks' time, which is going to be Remembrance Sunday. Of course, it's Saturday, actually, that is the 11th of November. It's one of the key reasons I'm here in Brighton trying to raise money for the Royal British Legion. So far, £140,000 has been donated. JustGiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. I can see something coming a mile off, and I'm absolutely certain that everybody else can as well, which is protests around the cenotaph on the Saturday, and it all kicks off. And then we have something on the Sunday as well. What do the police need to do, do you think, to get involved and get in amongst that and stop that from happening? Because I know that there are a lot of people out there right now who would feel mortally offended by the idea of having protests with a lot of foreign flags, let's be honest, hoisted near the cenotaph around that kind of that time of period of remembrance.
Well, I'm with you, Patrick. I'm a fifth-generation soldier. All my family have been soldiers. In fact, one of my great-grandfather was fighting the Ottoman Empire in Palestine. And so all these... it's a real thing for me. But what I think the police should be doing, of course, is putting a barrier up. Either it's easy to block off Whitehall to make sure that people don't get down there. When I was a young policeman, you had things like the National Front trying to get to the cenotaph. Now, the police were very good at getting rid of the National Front, so they should be very good at getting rid of other people. So there's enough resources in the Metropolitan Police to block off Whitehall and verify everybody who comes through. Because, as you say, to protest there would be a grave insult to the memory of the sacrifice of those men and women who died for the country.
It would be insulting. It would absolutely be insulting, and very concerning what we're seeing in Paris at the moment. Police shooting somebody who appears to have been on a radicalisation watch list over there. And Rishi Sunak coming out and warning people about a terror threat over here as well. Mike, thank you very much. Mike Neville there is an ex-Met Police detective, just having a look at some of the actions of our police force at the moment. Quickly now, justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. The donations are still flooding in. Rich has given £5. There's an excellent initiative. Thank you very much. We've got Patricia who says, well done, giving £40. Loads of people throwing whatever they can at this particular cause to show their love and their support for our veterans and indeed our country, which is massively appreciated at this moment in time. So well done, everybody. The GB News viewers and listeners always stand up to be counted when it matters. Thank you, thank you, thank you. JustGiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. But when I come back, I'm going to be talking to you about the latest from our king. He's been talking on that state visit to Kenya. There were concerns, is he going to apologise for Britain's colonial past? What's going to happen there? And I will have a veteran with me here as well. Patrick Christys, GB News. Stay tuned.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. Wow. Welcome back, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here in Brighton. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening on your radio as well. This is, may I say, the country's most listened to commercial news drive time show. That's all down to you spreading the word, doing, frankly, some of our advertising for us. But we absolutely love to throw our weight behind causes like this. The Royal British Legion in the run-up to Remembrance Sunday and their poppy appeal. In certain areas of the country, they do struggle to find people to go and hand the poppies out and to get a bit of money. I think as well the increasingly cashless society isn't helping when it comes to getting donations in as well. But there we go. But you guys have been donating in your droves. And I just want to give you the latest from our Just Giving page, justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. We are now at £143,045. And a massive thank you to Pam for giving £500. So thank you very, very much. Bless you. It means the world, and it will help to get veterans some housing, some mental health care, to help get them on the job ladder as well. So it really will mean the absolute world to a lot of people. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But I am going to go now to Cameron Walker, who is our royal correspondent, because Cameron's been watching the King's trip to Kenya very, very closely. He's over there. There were calls, weren't there, for him to do a bit of apologising for our colonial past. That appears to be everywhere. He goes at the moment. No doubt he'll be apologising to Norwich at some point for something that he hasn't done either. But Cameron, what's the latest?
Well, Patrick, the King has just finished delivering his speech at the State House in Nairobi. And before we talk about the colonial stuff, let me just bring you this little nugget, which I thought was really lovely and I hadn't actually heard before. He actually quoted from his mother's diary back in 1952. Of course, it's Queen Elizabeth II who arrived in Kenya as a princess and left as queen in 1952. And he said he was deeply moved to read the Queen's diary. And in that, Queen Elizabeth II said she didn't want to miss a moment of Kenya's extraordinary landscape. King Charles also said that he wanted to thank the people of Kenya for their support during the extremely difficult time for the Queen in 1952. When she became Queen Elizabeth II. He also talks about conservation. He jokes about the number of trees he'd planted over his royal career. But as expected, he did acknowledge the more painful times of Kenya and Britain's shared history. So let me just read you what he said. King Charles said in the last few minutes, "We must acknowledge the more painful times of our long and complex relationship. The wrongdoings of the past are a cause of the greatest sorrow and greatest regret. They were abhorrent and unjustifiable acts of violence committed against Kenyans as they waged their struggle for independence. And for that, there can be no excuse. It matters greatly to me that I should deepen my own understanding of these wrongs and that I meet some of those whose lives and communities were so grievously affected. None of this can change the past, but by addressing our history with honesty and openness, we can perhaps demonstrate the strength of our friendship today, and in so doing, we can, I hope, continue to build an even closer bond in the years ahead." That is what King Charles III said to the people of Kenya during his speech at the State's banquet in the last few minutes. You will notice, though, he speaks of his deep sorrow and regret. What he doesn't do is offer a full, formal apology for the wrongs carried out by British rulers in the 1950s to 1960, where it's estimated 90,000 Kenyans were either killed, tortured or maimed by British rulers for their part in opposing British rule. That is according to the Kenyan Human Rights Watch. It's understood that the British government's stance is by not offering a full apology for acts of for not offering a full apology for acts. We shouldn't have to offer a full apology for acts of colonial government's history. I'm told I have to hand back to Patrick. So Patrick, back to you.
Cameron, thank you very, very much. That's Cameron Walker there, our royal correspondent, keeping you abreast of the King in Kenya. Now, I've just got time to introduce my final guest, and it's Patrick Benham-Crosswell, who is a former British Army officer and author. Thank you very, very much for joining me, Patrick. Look, we are now closing in on the end of this show, and we have got £145,124 in the kitty, justgiving.com/page/GB News Poppy. Why do you think it's so important that we remember our veterans? How good a job do we do of doing that in this country anymore?
Well, I think we do. I think generally we do a very good job. I think you're doing a fantastic job. I think the average for the whole country has been an average of £1 per second has been given to the property appeals since the end of the First World War. And you're currently, just with your readership or your viewership, going at £2 a second. So you're doing phenomenally well at that. Remembrances for really for three groups of people. It's obviously for the benefit of veterans, including the needy ones on whom the money is spent. It's currently running about 100 million a year. And for the older veterans like myself, war dodgers and who've come out intact, whatever, it's a time to remember, how lucky we were and perhaps reflect on when life was more simple and we were better people. For serving personnel, of course, it's a time to be appreciated by the public and know that they're getting some demonstrable appreciation of the fact that their employment contract has the unlimited liability clause on it. And of course, for the public, it's, let's say, the freedoms we enjoy and perhaps we sometimes abuse. Those freedoms didn't come for free, and they don't exist for free. Ask any Falkland Islander. Wake up one day, they find themselves in an Argentine dictatorship. And ask any number of the 300 odd servicemen who died getting their freedom back. Freedom is something you have to work at.
Absolutely. Look, Patrick, incredibly well put. And I know that was short and sweet, but I can't think of a better way to end the show than what you've just said there. Those freedoms that we enjoy were hard-earned and hard-fought and paid for in the blood of a lot of British soldiers right around the world. That's Patrick Benham-Crosswell there, former British Army officer and author. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to give you the closing total, and can I just say a massive thank you to the wonderful GB News viewers and listeners. I love you all from the bottom of my heart. You always stand up to be counted. And the final total, just in the last 2 days, is £145,940 for the Royal British Legion Poppy Appeal. Thank you very, very much to the Royal British Legion here at Portslade for opening their doors and their arms to us here at GB News. And thank you a million times to you, wonderful GB News people. Take care.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. This time tomorrow, Storm Kieran will be arriving. There are many warnings in place for damaging gusts of wind, particularly on Thursday across parts of the south, and heavy rain. There's warnings tonight from this area of low pressure bringing more rain, but here comes the storm, as I say, really arriving during Wednesday night and then lingering throughout Thursday with amber warnings across parts of the south. We have Met Office yellow warnings in place for tonight and tomorrow across parts of Northern Ireland and the southeast for the heavy rain that moves in. The rain also spreading its way into southern Scotland through the night. Lots of showery rain coming into Wales and southern England too, and quite a breezy night. A mild night here, but another chilly one in northern Scotland, where most of the night will be dry. But it's going to be a very wet, a very different day tomorrow for the rain spreads in across Scotland. As I said, we have got warnings in place for the night and first thing in the morning for Northern Ireland and across the southeast. There will be a lot of spray and surface water on the roads for the morning rush hour. Pretty blustery here too. A gusty, blustery day with a mixture of sunshine and showers for most, staying soggy across northern Scotland. Temperatures at best getting into the teens. But here comes